If you're over 60 and your metabolism is slowed down and someone told you that's just what getting older looks like, that is not the complete picture. Most people over 60 have tried the standard advice: eat less, move more, and for a while, it works. Then it stops. The weight comes back, or it stops shifting at all, and nobody gives you a real explanation for why. I'm Marcus Reid, your senior health coach.
And I'm Suki Yamamoto, wellness specialist. As always, full transparency, Marcus and I are AI characters. This channel exists to give you research-backed information. No products, no supplements, just what the evidence actually says.
What we're going to show you today is the specific biological process driving metabolic slowdown after 60. Not a vague answer like your hormones change. Not, that's just aging. A specific, named, measurable process. And there is a 90-day protocol, backed by peer-reviewed research that directly targets it. But first, we need to talk about something that almost every source on this topic gets completely wrong.
There's a word for what is actually causing metabolic slowdown after 60. It is not slow metabolism. Slow metabolism is a symptom. It has a cause. The word is sarcopenia. If you have never heard that word before, or you have heard it and it was never properly explained, stay with us, because once you understand what sarcopenia actually is, everything about how to approach this becomes clear.
But let me ask you something before we get there. How much metabolically active tissue do you think you may have already lost, without knowing it? Let's jump in.
Sarcopenia is the progressive age-related loss of skeletal muscle mass and function. It begins in your late 30s, earlier than most people expect, but it accelerates sharply after 50 and again after 60. Research suggests adults lose approximately 1 to 2% of their muscle mass per year after 50. By the time most people reach their late 60s, they may have lost 15 to 20% of the muscle they had at their peak, often without noticing.
But I don't look smaller. I haven't visibly lost muscle.
That is one of the reasons sarcopenia goes undetected. As muscle mass decreases, fat tissue often fills the space. Body weight may stay the same or increase, while the ratio of muscle to fat shifts significantly. The scale does not tell you that. Your BMI does not tell you that, but your metabolism does.
Because muscle burns calories even when you're doing nothing.
This is the key point. Skeletal muscle is metabolically expensive tissue. Your body burns energy just to maintain it, even when you're sitting still. Research by Janssen and colleagues, published in the Journal of Applied Physiology in 2000, which measured body composition in 468 adults ranging from age 18 to 88, found that skeletal muscle accounts for 20 to 30% of your resting metabolic rate.
So 1 in 5 calories your body burns just sitting there. That comes from maintaining muscle.
Roughly, yes. Which means every year you lose muscle, your resting metabolic rate drops. Your body burns fewer calories at rest. And if your eating habits have not changed, or if you have only reduced them slightly, that gap shows up as fat gain, specifically visceral fat, the fat that accumulates around the abdomen.
So the metabolism is not broken. The engine that was running it has been quietly shrinking.
That is a reasonable way to put it. But here is where it gets more complicated, and this is where most advice on this topic falls short.
Because the obvious answer is just exercise more. More walks, more steps. That is what everyone says.
The instinct to move more is correct, but the type of movement matters enormously, and there is a second variable, just as important as the exercise, that most sources never mention. We will get to both. But first, I need to explain why the most common response to weight gain after 60 can actually make the underlying problem worse.
You mean eating less?
I mean aggressive calorie restriction without adequate protein. When people notice weight gain and a slowing metabolism, the first instinct is to eat less. That is understandable. In a younger adult, moderate calorie restriction reliably produces fat loss. But in an older adult who is already losing muscle, the picture is more complicated.
Why?
Because when you restrict calories significantly, particularly protein, your body needs to find energy from somewhere. After 60, it is more likely to source that energy from muscle tissue than it would have at 40. Research published by Deutz and colleagues in 2014 in Clinical Nutrition, which reviewed data from multiple studies on protein metabolism in older adults, found that in the absence of adequate protein and resistance training, aggressive calorie restriction leads to disproportionate loss of lean muscle mass. You lose more muscle than fat.
So you are eating less and still losing the wrong thing.
You are accelerating the very process that is driving the problem. Your metabolic rate drops further, the weight loss stalls, and most people conclude at that point that their metabolism is simply broken. It is not broken. It is being sent the wrong signals.
That is the opposite of what most people are doing.
It is, and it explains why so many people over 60 feel like they are doing everything right, eating less, moving more, and seeing diminishing returns year after year. Now let me explain what is happening at the cellular level, because this is what determines why the solution works. After 60, the body's ability to build and repair muscle tissue declines. This is called anabolic resistance. Your muscles become less sensitive to the signals that normally trigger muscle protein synthesis, the process of building and maintaining muscle fiber. Two things activate that process: mechanical load, which means resistance training, and dietary protein, specifically the amino acid leucine, which acts as a direct trigger.
So it is like the switch is still there. It just takes more to flip it.
That is accurate, and this is why walking, or light general activity, often does not produce the metabolic changes people expect. Walking is valuable. It supports cardiovascular health, mobility, and mood, but it does not provide sufficient mechanical load to stimulate meaningful muscle protein synthesis in an older adult. The muscle needs to be genuinely challenged. It needs to be pushed close to its current capacity.
That's the bit nobody says clearly. Move more is not a specific enough instruction.
It is not. And without that specificity, people spend months, sometimes years, doing the right thing in the wrong way, and then conclude it does not work, when the problem was never the effort, it was the application. There is a threshold below which resistance exercise produces little to no adaptation. Most people, particularly those new to structured training or returning after a long break, never reach it. Not because they are not trying, because no one told them where the line was.
So where is the line?
In 1994, Maria Fiataroni and colleagues published a landmark study in the New England Journal of Medicine. They worked with 100 nursing home residents, average age 87. These were not healthy, active adults. These were frail, elderly people with significant functional limitations. The researchers put one group through a resistance training program, 3 sessions per week for 10 weeks, focusing on the major leg muscles. The results were significant. Muscle strength increased by an average of 113%. Gait speed, how quickly participants could walk, improved meaningfully.
Wait, 113% strength increase in frail 87-year-olds in 10 weeks.
I want to be careful about what we take from that number. A significant portion of early strength gains come from neurological adaptation, the nervous system learning to recruit muscle fibers more efficiently, rather than purely from new muscle tissue. So the 113% is not a claim about doubling muscle mass, but the point holds. The biological capacity to respond to resistance training does not disappear with age.
So if that worked on frail 87-year-olds, what does the research say for someone in their 60s who is reasonably healthy and just dealing with the metabolism and weight issue?
A 2011 meta-analysis by Peterson and colleagues, published in Aging Research Reviews, brought together data from 47 separate studies on resistance training in older adults, most participants in their 60s and 70s. Across those studies, consistent resistance training produced measurable increases in muscle mass and significant improvements in strength and functional performance. The training protocols across those studies ran between 8 and 12 weeks. That is where the 90-day time frame comes from.
Not from a marketing claim, from the actual study timelines.
Exactly. And I want to be precise about the scope of that claim. 90 days of consistent resistance training produces measurable improvement in muscle mass and metabolic rate. It does not restore the muscle mass of a 35-year-old. It does not reverse decades of gradual loss in 3 months. The research does not support that. What it supports is meaningful, clinically significant change in that window. And for someone over 60 who has never approached this systematically, that change is substantial.
That distinction matters.
Now here is the variable that determines whether the training actually produces the results the research shows, and it is the one most people skip entirely.
Protein.
In 2015, Daniel Moore and colleagues published a study in the Journals of Gerontology looking specifically at how much protein per meal is required to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis in healthy older adults versus younger adults. In younger adults, under 40, the threshold was approximately 20 grams of protein per meal. In adults over 60, the threshold was approximately 40 grams.
Double.
Roughly double. And this has significant practical consequences. Most older adults are consuming protein in amounts calibrated for a younger body, or they have reduced protein because they are cutting overall calories. They train consistently for 10 or 12 weeks. They see minimal results, and they conclude resistance training does not work for them. But the training was providing the stimulus. The protein was not providing the building material. You cannot build a wall if half the bricks are missing.
So both are required, the exercise and the protein, not one or the other.
Neither works properly without the other. And there is one more nuance here, the part most sources do not mention.
What is that?
Distribution. Research, including a 2014 study by Mamarao and colleagues published in the Journal of Nutrition, found that distributing protein evenly across 3 meals produces significantly better muscle protein synthesis outcomes than loading most of your protein into one meal. Your muscle can only process and use a limited amount at one sitting. Eating a small breakfast, a small lunch, and a very large protein dinner does not compensate for the shortfall in the first 2 meals.
So it is not just how much, it is when.
How much and when both matter.
Let us make this concrete. What does the actual protocol look like?
2 parts. They work together. Neither is optional. Part 1, resistance training. 3 sessions per week, not 5, not 7. 3 with rest days between each session. Each session should target the major muscle groups: legs, back, chest, arms, shoulders. You do not need a gym. Bodyweight exercises work. Resistance bands work. The load must be sufficient to genuinely challenge the muscle, which means by the last 2 or 3 repetitions of a set, the effort should feel real, not painful, but difficult.
Not a gentle stroll through some light movements.
Not a stroll. 2 to 3 sets per exercise, 8 to 12 repetitions per set, 2 minutes of rest between sets. A complete session covering all major muscle groups takes 30 to 40 minutes.
3 times a week, 30 to 40 minutes. That is manageable for most people.
It is, and the rest days are not optional. Muscle is not built during the session. The session creates the stimulus. Muscle is built during recovery, when the body repairs the microdamage and adds new protein to the fiber. Training every day without rest does not accelerate the process, it disrupts it.
And the protein side?
Part 2. Protein target and distribution. The evidence supports a daily target of 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight for adults over 60. The standard recommended daily amount is 0.8 grams per kilogram, but that figure is designed to prevent deficiency in the general population. It is not designed to support muscle preservation in an aging adult. There is a meaningful gap between the two.
How does someone calculate their own number?
Take your body weight in kilograms and multiply by 1.2. That is your minimum daily target. If you weigh 70 kilograms, roughly 154 pounds, your minimum is 84 grams of protein per day. Your upper end is 112 grams. Now divide that across 3 meals.
So roughly 28 to 37 grams of protein per meal at 70 kilograms.
Correct. A 100-gram serving of chicken breast provides approximately 31 grams. A large egg provides approximately 6 grams. A cup of Greek yogurt provides approximately 17 grams. Canned tuna, 100 grams, provides approximately 25 grams. These are not expensive or complex foods.
You do not need protein shakes to hit these numbers.
You may not. Whole food sources are preferable. If you genuinely cannot reach your protein target through food, which is a legitimate challenge for some people, particularly those with smaller appetites, a whey or plant-based protein supplement is a reasonable addition, but the most useful first step is not to go and buy supplements. The most useful first step is to track your actual protein intake for 3 days and see how far you currently are from the target. Most people are surprised by how achievable it is to close that gap with simple food adjustments.
And then there is the consistency piece.
That is the piece that determines whether any of this works. 2 good weeks followed by 2 weeks off does not produce the same outcome as 12 consecutive weeks of consistent effort. The biological process of muscle synthesis requires sustained, repeated stimulus. The Peterson meta-analysis I cited earlier, 47 studies, 8 to 12 weeks each. The Fiataroni study, 10 weeks. The research consistently produces results over that window, not in 2 weeks.
Patience is the part nobody wants to hear.
Patience is the part nobody wants to hear. But here is the honest version: 90 days of consistent resistance training, 3 sessions per week with sufficient load, combined with a daily protein target of 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram distributed across 3 meals. The research supports measurable improvement in muscle mass, resting metabolic rate, and body composition in that window. Not a dramatic transformation, a measurable, clinically significant change, and for someone over 60 who has never approached this systematically, that change is substantial.
Let us pull this together.
3 things to take from today. First, metabolic slowdown after 60 is not inevitable in the way most sources suggest. The primary driver is sarcopenia, the gradual, measurable loss of skeletal muscle mass. That process can be meaningfully addressed with the right approach. Second, resistance training 3 times per week, not walking, not light cardio, is the direct intervention. Sufficient load to genuinely challenge the muscle. 2 to 3 sets, 8 to 12 reps, 30 to 40 minutes per session. Third, protein intake is just as important as the training. 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, distributed across 3 meals. Most adults over 60 are currently eating below this threshold, and that gap is the reason the exercise often feels like it is not working.
If this was useful, and I think it was, the like button genuinely helps more people find it. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss next week. And if you are already doing resistance training and not seeing the results you expected, drop a comment below and tell us what your current routine looks like, because the answer is almost always in the detail, and we read every comment.